Hello you guys, welcome back to my channel. I am so excited because today is the first day of palette week, where every single day for 7 straight days I will be posting some sort of eyeshadow palette themed content. You guys know how much I love eyeshadow, like talking about eyeshadow palettes, right? I mean, yes. So 4 times a year I do a full dedicated palette week, 7 straight days of palette themed content. Today is day number 1 and we are talking about eyeshadow palettes that have altered my brain chemistry. So I have 15 eyeshadow palettes to talk to you guys about today that changed something in my brain. flipped a switch, and altered my brain chemistry in one way or another. We'll get into the reasons why. I originally saw this video done by, I believe her channel is Goth Adjacent, so I'll leave her down below. It was a collab as well, so I'll leave both creators down below, their link to videos in case you're interested in checking out other content like this. I thought it was a really fun video idea and it really got me thinking about palettes that have kind of like changed things in the way that I think about eyeshadow palettes. So if you're interested, stay tuned. First, if you have palette themed content ideas you would like to see from me, let me know in the comments. I do have my week of content planned out, but I also like to sprinkle in eyeshadow palette content like every single month, and I'm planning the next palette week. So let me know what palette themed content ideas you have that you would like to see from me. I love hearing from you guys. Other than that, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like project planning content, palette themed content, or just chit chatting about makeup, we do it all over here and I'd love if you'd consider subscribing. Other than that, let's get into chatting about these palettes. Okay, you guys, instantly the first eyeshadow palette that came to mind was my Natasha Denona Gold palette. And the reason I feel like this eyeshadow palette kind of altered my brain chemistry, if you will, is this is really one of the first eyeshadow palettes. This eyeshadow palette plus Natasha Denona, not Natasha Denona, ABH Jackie. Both I'm talking about in this video. These are the 2 eyeshadow palettes that I can really like click in my mind to like me being interested in green eyeshadow, which I have since gone on to absolutely love green eyeshadow. And I remember when the Natasha Denona palette was being teased, I thought in my head, like, who in their right mind would spend $129 on this eyeshadow palette that has a bunch of brown matte shades that all look the exact same, and then like I just thought this entire eyeshadow palette looked the exact same. Now I know you cannot get this eyeshadow palette anymore. I do know Alter Ego makes a dupe, which I can leave linked for you guys. I also have a code with Alter Ego, which I also need to purchase the Goddess palette so that I know truly if it is a dupe or not. But if you were interested in this color story, that they literally duped the palette, like they duped the color story. This palette, I loved every single one of the matte browns. They actually do have a lot of like differences when you see this palette in person, and they're just like my perfect like neutral or warm brown matte shades. Like if I could only live with these matte brown shades, I would make do. I would absolutely make do. But it is truly this shade right here and then this shade right here that I feel like really, like I tried them and I was like, I need to try all the green eyeshadow now. Like I absolutely need to try all the green eyeshadow. I love green eyeshadow now. And this is like one of the very first palettes that I can relate to loving green eyeshadow. And then alongside that, I think, I'm almost positive, this came first. And then I purchased ABH Jackie. And I purchased ABH Jackie specifically because there was this shade right here. This is the shade Sponsored. And I absolutely fell in love with that shade. It's kind of like one of those like green to like reddy brown sort of shades. And I fell in love with that shade. But over time, this eyeshadow palette, I feel like just, I don't even know if like altered my brain chemistry is the right word for it, but I really fell in love with like the shade Zam to do just like the warmest smoky eye with like the glitteriest gold shade all over the lid. This really became my comfort. Like if I want to look pretty, I can reach into this palette. I know exactly what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna have like these glistening glittery eyelids and I'm gonna feel so confident. So like in that way, I feel like this really changed the game for me just because I have that like comfort look I can go to. In fact, I was just watching a video the other day where I like had that look and I was like, there's the look, there's my like go-to look if I don't want to think about it, but I want to look super pretty. But originally I purchased the shade for the shade sponsored, and I do feel like this shade also just has like made me on the hunt for like all the green shades alongside the Natasha Denona Gold. Okay, next up I have 2 Adept palettes to talk about, and actually I did try Adept singles before I tried the Adept eyeshadow palettes, and the Adept singles made me start to think differently about eyeshadow as well. I think those may have been my first like actual like duochrome sort of eyeshadow shades. But I had purchased the Adept Plain Jane Remastered palette and I liked it. I do like that palette, but I'm like, okay, like it's good. But then I got the Adept Heather Austin palette, and I purchased both of these at the same time, as well as the Adept Ninhydrin eyeshadow palette. And this really started to make me just absolutely crave colorful duochrome or triochrome shadows. I will say I'm not like the biggest fan of multi-chrome shadows, but when it comes to like a shifty shade like a duochrome, I want all of the pretty eyeshadow shades. So up first we have the Adept Heather Austin, and like this passport shade, this like pinky blue, has become a shade that I absolutely crave. If I see an ethereal pinky blue eyeshadow, I want it. I think this is such a beautiful shade. I also love the shade Scrubs. It's kind of like this blue to purple, like shifty shade. Just, this palette is so beautiful. And then we also have the Ninhydrin palette, which this eyeshadow palette, okay, like this shade, like just makes me drool for every bluey purple blurple sort of shade ever to exist. But also within this palette, we have these really, really beautiful green shifty shades. Overall, I just think Adept has altered my brain chemistry because it's also one of the first like indie brand eyeshadow brands that I have purchased from. And because I've had so much fun playing around with their formula, it's really like made me want to try all of the indie formulas. It's really made me feel more comfortable and confident with just something like I'm really going for it, something bold on the eyes. I just think Adept makes such a wonderful formula as well. Definitely this was like one of my first times dipping my toes in indie, and I haven't really looked back since. We all knew I was going to talk about the Danessa Myricks Lightwork Volume 3 eyeshadow palette, right? I think this is like this, well, ABH Jackie, Huda Mercury Retrograde, and then this. I'm like, those are like the top 3 like palettes that I can think of in my head that like I literally have not shut up about. Yes, I don't talk about Mercury Retrograde and Jackie as much anymore, but like literally since owning this, I will talk about this in every single video that I can. I'll be talking about like, talking to my friends about like cleaning my car, and somehow I'll bring up this eyeshadow palette because I love it so much. This, there are multi-chromes in this eyeshadow palette. I will say I really do like the multi-chromes in this palette. I don't think that there's something that end up looking really like a bruise on my eyes. Like sometimes multi-chromes can look like bruises on your eyes. Like they look so beautiful swatched, but then they just don't translate on the eyes. The shade Polaris is the most beautiful green teal shifty cream eyeshadow shade, but you can use this to layer with the shadows in this palette to like create so many different like looks, finishes, and shades. I absolutely love it. I remember getting this and I would like literally swatch it, not just like one day swatched it out in the sun and then like looked at the, like I would sometimes just be like, you know what, I'm feeling bored today, and I would swatch this and I would sit out on my patio and I would just like look at the shifting beautifulness on my arms. This has also made me, obviously I've gone on to purchase every single Danessa Myricks Lightwork palette that has released since, but it's also made me more interested in just indie and multi-chrome shades, duochrome shades. Again, not really multi-chrome, but like special shades. Okay, I know I mentioned Huda Mercury Retrograde, so I kind of want to talk about this. This palette I really attribute to just being so excited about eyeshadow. Like this is one of the palettes I first remember just being so extremely excited about, and I think it's because like I had not played around with a lot of color up until purchasing this palette. And yes, this is not the most colorful palette ever, but this palette really made me want to experiment more, not even just with color but just with different textures. I have nostalgic, like I purchased this palette and then I like did research on Mercury Retrograde and like have ever since been like enamored with the concept of Mercury Retrograde, which also I feel like has altered my brain chemistry a little bit. Again, this is not like a favorite palette anymore, but I still just have very fond memories tied to this palette. I think there's really, really beautiful shades in this still to this day. I'm disappointed I only have one pan in here. I need, like, the shade Nebula. This is like the first, actually I was gonna say there's a different palette I'm gonna talk about that I'm like falling in love with blue eyeshadow, but like I swear this is my first, like, ooh, I need to reach into this now that I like am obsessed with blue eyeshadow, because this is kind of like that almost like periwinkle silver sort of just beautifulness. But this is definitely a palette that comes to mind when I'm thinking of altering the brain chemistry. And then right alongside that, I have the Huda Rose Quartz palette. And it's this eyeshadow palette that I really can think of me falling in love with like blues, because this is such an ethereal beauty. There is the shade Moon Magic here, which is kind of like that pink, like shifty to blue sort of shade that I was talking about. But you also have the shade Cosmic Love, which is a really beautiful kind of like blurple. And then you have Blissful, which is kind of like this blue, green, silver sort of shift. And when I No Pan left behind this palette last year, it did something to my soul, I'm telling you. And ever since doing that, I have not been able to put down the blue eyeshadow. And it's not like you look into this palette and think, oh, this is a blue palette. But I love blue eyeshadow, and this is the palette I have to thank for that. Okay, talking about color, this is definitely an eyeshadow palette I think of as altering the brain chemistry. This, first of all, is such a cute little eyeshadow palette, but I purchased this and I really didn't have a rainbow palette at the time. I didn't have a lot of colors at all in my collection, like a lot of like colorful shades, especially matte shades. And I love this eyeshadow palette because I feel like there's shades within this palette that were really easy for me to work with as a beginner. And it just made me want to experiment more and dabble more with eyeshadow. I remember purchasing this, and I believe I went on to purchase the Glamlite Cake palette shortly after, as well as the Ice Cream Dream. And granted, I don't do super bold, rainbow, colorful looks all the time, but there is something just so special about this eyeshadow palette. This shade 8-Bit, I swear, just lives like rent-free in my mind. It's one of my favorite matte, colorful shades in my palette. I also, or in my palette collection. I also love the shade Player One. It's just cute, cozy, fond memories. In 2020, I definitely played around with color quite a bit more, and this was the palette that kind of kicked that off. If I didn't purchase this palette, I honestly don't know if I would have even gone on to like experiment more with indie, because I feel like this was like dipping my toes in color, and then slowly over time, like, because indie's more colorful, even like their shimmers, they're just more colorful. Slowly over time, I like, you know, wanted to play with colorful indie shimmer shades. So I feel like that palette, I have to thank for that. Okay, the NARS Summer Solstice palette. Now this is nothing earth shattering. This, you know, you look at this and you're like, girl, that is literally like, this could have, this is nothing special. Could have released in 2014, 15, 16, nothing special. No. But this is my first experience with NARS, and I fell in love with this formula. It was so easy to work with, so easy to use. I absolutely love these shades right here. This lid topper, sparkly, just glistening, beautiful shade, I can't live without. I reached for this so much the year that I purchased this, and I've gone on to purchase every single NARS eyeshadow palette with the exception of like 1 or 2 scents. So obviously this altered something in my brain to say like, girl, you need every NARS eyeshadow palette now to ever release, because they all look the same. But still my brain is telling me I need every single one of them. The Rowan Quads. This one in my hands is Mood Forever, but honestly any of the Rowan Quads, I don't know what kind of magic is in this formula. I don't love a cream shadow on the lids. I don't like a shadow stick. I don't like a single potted cream shadow, but there is something about these quads I absolutely love. It's not like something I'm avoiding reaching for or I have to force myself to reach for. It's often like, ooh, I want to do like a cute little neutral look and I want to pop one of these on to really make that look pop. Or even using these shades on its own, it truly adds something just so special to the eyes. The way that the light like reflects off of these cream shadows is so beautiful. I mentioned on my channel, my daughter had taken my 1111 and destroyed it, and I literally instantly repurchased like that night. I had to have it back in my life. There's 2 quads, I believe, that they make that I don't own. One of them is like the cool tone. I feel like I need the cool tone one. And then there's maybe like a Gold Rush one. I still do want them all. They are more expensive, so I'm trying to like not purchase them all, especially because they are cream shadow. Like they're definitely gonna go bad more quickly than some of my other eyeshadow palettes. I'm currently working on my 75 degrees in my Rolling Project 10 pan, and if I finish that, maybe as a like, not prize, as a reward to myself at the end of the year, if I almost finish, or like if I declutter that palette, then I can purchase the cool toned one. But these, there is something special about these that have definitely altered this little brain up here. The rest are all indie palettes. First I'm going to talk about the Glaminatrix Nearly Natural eyeshadow palette. This really did something to me, and I think what really, I relate this palette to really being obsessed with something so sparkly on the eyes. Yes, I've always liked a metallic or a shimmer on the eyes, but something just so sparkly. I love this eyeshadow palette. This has quickly become one of my favorite eyeshadow palettes in my entire makeup collection. And what I also love about this is that the metallics are like, you swipe it on your eyes with like just a quick swipe, and it's so punchy and bold and metallic. But then the mattes are more buildable, and I need that in a matte because we got something going on with eyes. They're hooded, they're not the same size. Like the one lid's more hooded than the other. Like, it's not easy to do the eyes, and I am very heavy-handed as well. So the buildable, the better when it comes to the matte shades. This color story too, I just think is something special. So definitely had to mention this. Then I had to mention the Unearthly formula. Something happened when I tried this eyeshadow palette. First of all, I did this like pink purple look, and I went out running errands that day with my daughter, and two strangers in public stopped me to tell me that they liked my eyeshadow that day, and it has never happened. So obviously I was like riding my high horse, letting that feed my ego a little bit, being like, oh my gosh, like this eyeshadow palette is like gonna have strangers complimenting me. Not that I really care for that, but anyway, I do really appreciate the compliments. Their formula, like their duochrome shades are absolutely incredible, and there's not a lot like that out on the market that I've tried. Now granted, I've only just, I feel like, started to begin dipping my toes in like all the indie brands, but like I feel like I'm going to compare many of them to the Unearthly, especially like their duochrome shades. They're just beautiful. So that one I had to mention. I also had to mention the NC Rain Cold Moon eyeshadow palette, and I think what really like altered my brain chemistry was with this palette was just knowing I can reach into this palette, pop a matte in the crease, and then just take one of the metallic shades, pop it on the lids, and I literally have a look that I spent 5 minutes doing for my eyes, and it is going to look like I spent so much time doing my eyeshadow. I have never used shades like some of the shades that are in here, some of the hologram shades. Also, like, the color story of the mattes, I really, really like. It's very cohesive. There's equal parts shimmers to equal parts matte, but really, again, the part that like, I did a look that I love so much with the shade Storm Fairy. Again, like these like blues, they are altering my brain chemistry because I'm just loving all the blues, but it really, again, comes down to just knowing like one matte, one shimmer, looks like I spent hours on my eyes, spent 5 minutes, and like it can be that easy. And the last palette I have to mention, you guys, is the Basic Witch palette from Bella Beauté Bar. And this did something to my brain, and I can say that because I saw that this palette release. I was really interested, but I was like, that's so expensive, I'm not gonna buy it. And then I kept thinking about it and kept thinking about it and kept thinking about it and literally kept thinking. I've never thought of a release more than I thought about this palette. Then it got sold out. Then I was up for pre-order, and I was thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And then I finally one day, literally I had checked the night before, it was still available. Next day, I go on because I finally made the decision I'm going to purchase this, and it was sold out. And I was like, you have absolutely got to be kidding me. The amount of like sorrow I felt over not being able to buy an eyeshadow palette is actually quite embarrassing to think about. But then I literally kept thinking about the eyeshadow palette, and then Bella Beauté Bar posted on their Instagram, and they were like, maybe we can bring back like a limited amount of pre-orders who would be interested. And like, I rarely comment on Instagram, but I was like, this girl would, please, please, please. And they have since opened it up. This is still available now, again, I believe for pre-order. I snatched it up the moment I saw that I could. The way that they do, like their multi-chrome shades, this shade Cauldron, this like blue blue to green to teal. It is, and it's also literally the thinnest, smoothest eyeshadow formula I feel like I have ever felt for something that is so shifty. It is so special in my opinion. Just looking at swatches of this eyeshadow palette truly has me drooling, and I just this did something to me. And now I've gone on to literally need to purchase every single Bella Beauté bar eyeshadow palette since. If you are interested in this palette, I do have a code with them, no pressure. But if you've been thinking about this palette as much as I have, it is worth it in my opinion. After that, you guys, those are all of the eyeshadow palettes that first came to mind when I think of altering the brain chemistry. I would love to know in the comments below, what palettes do you own in your collection that you feel like altered your brain chemistry in one way or another? Maybe you have a palette that like literally makes you so mad even to think about. For me, I feel like that would be the Lawless, the lavender one eyeshadow palette. That altered my brain chemistry in a bad way, in the fact that it made me literally so angry. I didn't know I could get that angry at makeup. Would love to know if you have one of those eyeshadow palettes in your collection as well. Other than that, you guys, that's gonna wrap it up for today's video. Thank you so much for sticking around to watch and for supporting me and my channel as you guys always do. Thank you for supporting Palette Week, and I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow for another palette video. Bye.